Community Wisdom podcast with Joel Primack. He is a community consultant and he is also the podcast host at the Community Led Growth Show. Going to have an exciting convo about two main topics today: community, obviously, and the second one being podcasting, which is one of my favorite topics. Joel, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you're into nowadays?
Yeah. So first off, thank you so much for having me on the show, Charles. Really appreciate the opportunity. So I am currently up to a few things. One, working with my consulting clients right now. So those have been going well for the last few months in the community space. I am also heavily leaning into creating content. So season 2 of my podcast is very close to dropping. Been writing a lot more on LinkedIn, working with some companies, things like that. So it's been super fun. A little bit about me beyond those couple things of what I'm up to. I was previously at Lattice on their social and community team, as well as the community manager at Sales Assembly a handful of years ago, back when it first started. So super excited to be here and jump into the conversation with you.
Did you know that there was a famous professor of physics and astrophysics that was named Joel Primack?
Yep,
Is
we're just
he a
different people.
relative?
Not to my knowledge.
Tell us about your early life and how you got to your community roles in the podcasting that you're doing nowadays.
Uh, yeah, so I kind of stumbled into it, honestly. Um, at Sales Assembly, honestly, the story is more or less pretty casual. I was working at a company beforehand. A member of that team was leaving to join Sales Assembly too. They asked if I wanted to join as an intern for a few months and like see how things went. So we had coffee, and the rest is pretty much history at this point. I was there for 2.5 years, starting off as an intern for 6 months, independent contractor for another 6 months, and then their first full-time employee. So I hit a lot of firsts during my time, in terms of my career, in terms of things for the business too. So it was a really exciting experience. And then honestly, pretty much the same story again happened with the podcast. Um, I was a guest on a show. The podcast host of that show and I stayed in touch and became friends. I was asked to be an advisor to a company, and I said yes. And then they said that as part of my role as an advisor, if I'd be open to hosting the podcast for them. So I said, yes, sure, why not? Um, Season 1 was great, 31 episodes in total with some amazing guests from great companies. So very exciting times. And now season 2 is 100% independent and like owned by me. Um, and we're, as I said, coming out in a handful of weeks. So super excited about all that. And yeah.
And communities, the why you got into it, it's kind of a coincidence. Not sure if you have any insights regarding this, but why do you think community are the way to sell, quote unquote, in 2023?
I mean, I don't think that it's the way to sell. I think it's a way to like build authentic relationships. Like that's the thing is like, and I don't really care if you're selling like anything or like what you're selling, but it's more so like how you go about building relationships. Like if you all you're doing is sending like the same generic email, but just in like a DM on a community, like it's the same effect. You're just literally changing like the place. So I wouldn't say that it's the place to sell. I'd say it's the place to like build authentic relationships and truly like add value to people. I mean, especially with like the rise of AI and other things, like poor outreach and like poor to like mediocre outreach, in my opinion, from like salespeople can just be automated now. Like, why do people need to do bad essentially? I don't need to hire someone to do bad. I need to hire someone that can like do good to great on that scale and do things that like AI just can't figure out because it's like authentic, because you're putting different pieces together from different areas and because you're building authentic relationships. So that's like my somewhat, I don't know if it's a hot take, but it's definitely a take, um, that like they're not the place to sell, because also in many communities you can get kicked out for breaking rules. And oftentimes, at least that's like pretty common rules, like no selling, no soliciting, no spamming. So I would actually argue that you won't be selling too far or like too long in many communities, especially where like either I work or ones that I know many people at. So yeah.
Yeah, the sell quote unquote meaning exchanging energy, so win-win, right? So I think communities that don't have a back-end offer, obviously it's not sustainable. I do think that you can kind of quote unquote exploit the value that you've added and ask for an energy trade in exchange for all the value that you added. Or hey, are you ready to step this up? Give me some cash and I will multiply this cash with this new offer. Cash and selling just being an energy exchange. So the hot take, yes, on the outbound, it's a bit hot because yes, most of the outreach out there sucks. I do think that there are people that are good at it, that have spent a lot of their time. For example, my coach, Justin Michael, and hopefully myself, we send stuff that tends to work. For example, I have this podcast offer that you accepted that does quite good, and it's win-win. It's like I add value to you, I expose you to my audience, you add value to me, I give you insights, you give me insights. This tends to be win-win. Now, the question I had regarding AI, what does authentic means? Because in my brain, GPT can pretty much reproduce anything that's human. So I guess it's the ethical definition of, well, you have to disclaim if you use an AI that an AI was used, and that AI can still generate authenticity. It's like, hey, we went to the same school or we went to the same EDM event, so we partied together. And I think the AI can do that. So what would be your definition of authentic vs inauthentic?
I mean, I don't think honestly like any of those things that you just mentioned actually are like great personalization, and they would essentially just be tokens. Like, I don't think that those things are good. Like, I write about, for example, I'm sure you saw like my LinkedIn post. I assume that that's like where you pulled the EDM thing from. Like, I literally wrote a EDM and like community kind of post today on LinkedIn. And it's no secret that like I like going to concerts. I've also written about that before. Like, the Chainsmokers are one of my favorite artists. I've seen Fall Out Boy. I took an unplugged weekend and I was at a music festival earlier in the summer, things like that. And like school, it's the most, to me, like the most generic and almost eye roll token out there. It's just right followed by probably, I saw your profile on LinkedIn while scrolling. Or, I mean, at that point, you might as well just say, like, congratulations, we're both breathing air. Like they're all just awful. I'm sorry. So sorry. Actually, I'm kind of not though at the same time. Like those aren't things that are genuine. Those are things you just like read and fed into AI and like it pulled. So I don't actually think that that's like interesting. I think like at least an example of something that I'd be more interested in is like I don't even know what would catch my eye.
Mhm.
But I can promise you that like a school personalization token doesn't. I reject people all the time who connect with me and use that as like the token or
Probably listening to a
personalization place.
podcast, right? Like, hey Joel, I listened to one of the pods and you said that resonated with me. Do you feel that we could have this conversation that would add both value to us? I mean, not phrased that way, but a
Yeah.
convo that could lead us to the next level, a win-win offer.
I would say it would have to be more specific. Like just having a conversation, my at least right now, my time is quite literally how I make my money as a consultant. So for me, I like watch my time very closely. So I would probably say something like, hey, potentially, like, what are you trying, like, what's the conversation about? And like if it's not for me, if it's not right now, or if it's a never, like I'll just let people know. Very rarely I will say like, do I honestly ever ignore a no?
Right.
Usually that I will reject eat quickly and very swiftly
Yeah.
connections with notes that I think are 100% like boring,
Right.
unimaginable, or how I don't think either or like I would get value from being connected to that person too.
Right. I guess the podcast offers somewhat good. Guest that I had recently, Andy Moet, he's CEO of
Mhm.
Gated. You probably know
Yep,
him.
I
And
know it, Andy.
the concept being that you and I, we have priorities, right? And you can contact me if this is about this. So let's say that I'm looking for a tax lawyer. I would have it in there. If you're a tax lawyer, you can reach out to me and I'm going to consider what you have to tell me. So that could be a potential concept. So you can imagine a future of like my AI with my needs, right? And your AI with your needs and your priorities and your goals and your potential ROIs talking to one another and seeing if it's a good fit. And obviously, we would have to probably have a middleman to ensure that both AIs are not trying to trick one another. Um, that's how I can see it. Because other than that, like genuine human connections, I mean, maybe you and I, we actually met in an EDM concert. We danced together, had a lot of fun, and lost contact. Maybe an AI could even reproduce that. That would be quite funny. But authentic connections, other than like my childhood friends, I'm not even sure. Nowadays, I don't socialize much. I wish I would. I actually met a couple of entrepreneurs here in Oaxaca, Mexico. But what do you think about that future in which my needs would be paired through an API with your needs?
Um, I mean, it's pretty similar actually through like matching programs that you see in communities or like internally using tools like intros.ai or Donut, Meetsy, etc. Um, so I won't say that it's the most like revolutionary thing, but equally have I found tremendous value through those before outside of our internal program at Lattice? Not really. Um, doesn't maybe just mean that like I wasn't in good matching programs before and need better like things potentially. Equally, does it sometimes just show that like those types of programs, while cool, can be good, but they are rarely the most meaningful thing, potentially. I think that like each person though chooses to engage with others how they wish to engage.
Right,
And even for some, like that can just mean going into a community and just reading, not actually reacting with any emojis, not commenting, not posting. But if that's all they want to do is read, and that's how they gain value from being a member of that community and that space, then there's nothing wrong with it. So that would be like my kind of thoughts of to each their own, and just like
because that was
try
exactly
out
my
some
next
stuff.
point. Like there's people just staying in communities and draining the life out of it. But my hypothesis here is that it's like the glass is kind of overflowing, and one day when they're at the level of being able to share that knowledge, they really synthesize the full knowledge and have enough experience to share. Now I think that day will come. How do you make sure that a community stays powerful and that most members add value? And so that's the first question. The second one, is it 20% that adds value and 80% consumes value? What would be the stats here?
I mean, generally, I would say that there's a pretty wide consensus in the community space that we generally feel and follow like the 99-1 rule. So 90% of members will be like more passive, and that's fine. 10% of people, or like 9%, excuse me, will be like active and engage, and then 1% or so will be like your advocates, your ambassadors, your raving fans, And I mean, as I said, like all of it's fine. It's just how people wish to engage, spend their time, and grow and like connect with others, hopefully, and ultimately gain value, whatever that looks like for them in terms of helping them achieve whatever they're looking to achieve or improve or grow in. Um, so I would say that that's generally like a pretty widely accepted take in community. And I think going back to your point though about like draining the life, they don't drain the life. You need members, even if they're just there to read, because then what's the point of just putting content into an empty space? I mean, at that point, you might as well just be creating a Slack community by yourself and inviting no one to it. That would be the same effect. So I think you need people um, to just like be there. And they'll be the ones also who maybe attend a virtual event, but maybe they're just quiet or don't feel comfortable sharing, or there are 80 million other reasons that they prefer not to actively participate, but they do want to learn, they do want to engage in that way, or they'll watch the on-demand recording. Again, great way to do it, and nothing wrong with it.
That got me thinking, like if there are folks out there that try to create a one king at the top community and there's no like super promoters, there's no like 9 and 1%, they're just like 1%. Does that happen sometime, and do these communities thrive in the end, or you need kind of the lieutenants to promote the community for you?
I mean, I think it's best to always have members heavily involved, even if it's a small group of members that are passionate, really deeply care, because from those conversations and those connections, you, whether you're internal at a company or it's just like a fun hobby, whatever, you're then able to tap into them and learn what they want and then co-create with them. Because the whole beauty of community is like helping people, and therefore the best way to do that is learn from the people who you're trying to help and then take them along on the journey with you. So build in points where you're going to say like, hey, once we complete the V1 of this new program where we plan to launch, we're going to actually share it with 10 of our ambassadors in a closed off like session and just get their feedback. We're going to walk them through it. They're going to provide feedback. We'll iterate. We'll do it again one more time, and then we'll launch it. Like there's plenty of ways to engage and like bring members along for the ride so they feel like that they have a say, how their voice was heard, and that they feel, as I said earlier, like more deeply connected, because people will always remember how you make them feel, not always what you said. And that's the beauty of community, no matter the type of community, is that you need to make people feel connected to you as like a person, to your company, but in terms of like the value that they got is huge. For example, I know at Lattice, when I was on their social and community team, one of our members actually became friends with another member, and they talked regularly, and now they talk pretty constantly, and they've met up in real life, like in person. That to me is amazing, that like this person got a friend out of a community, not just like a work colleague who they're casual connections with or something. They got a legitimate friend. Like that is amazing to me.
I think we need our communities as humans. Like I told you, I met various entrepreneurs here in Oaxaca physically, and they became friends this year. So I'm seeing my podcast kind of as a community. So how are you building your own community? Is that does that take shape and form as a Comzer group? And where does the podcast stand in there for you?
Um, I'm not really trying to build anything, honestly. I'm just here like having fun, which sounds potentially kind of bad. I'm not really trying to achieve any business goals or anything. For me, the podcast is one, it's a great way for me to learn from people who are in the space, because outside of a handful of companies, that have been investing in community for a long time relatively now. Community as a business function is pretty new. So I'm super excited and fortunate enough that I'm able to have conversations with amazing guests and learn from them. So that's one. I would say two is I also really like producing the content to help people on their community journey, wherever they are, or even if they're just starting off and are kind of community curious. Hopefully, some of the episodes are helpful and valuable to them too, and allow them to gain a healthy amount of understanding and insights to then feel, even if it's 1% more informed, that 1% is meaningful and valuable to me. Like, I feel that I did my job if one person feels 1% better, more confident, more educated by the time they finish listening to an episode. I have hit what I wanted to hit. I honestly, beyond that, like, am I have nothing else. Like, I'm just here having fun, building the podcast, sharing content, participating in various programs around content because I like to connect, share, and educate. As I said, I'm not really doing it for a specific business outcome.
Right. Yeah. 1% increase in learning, especially in my case, would be humongous. So if you can achieve that with me, I'll buy you a donut or 12 or a dozen. For your community consultant services, if I would hire you as a consultant, how much would you charge me? What would be the outcome? Would you start with a strategy? Where would we go from there?
Um, well, I would say like there are a handful of it depenses in there. Starting off with the biggest one being, so the way I've essentially built my business is I'm an outsourced community manager, and I designed it for a few reasons to be that way. But the big one, especially tied into the money question that you asked, is that I personally value like financial stability. And so by doing and building my business this way, I'm fortunate enough to be able to then just say, hey, on a monthly basis, this client is buying this many hours of me. This is the rate of that. Therefore, here's what I invoice at the top of each month for my work. So that I would say is generally how I'd approach kind of those two things. And in terms of the like business outcomes and services and whatnot, I would figure that out honestly before ever signing. That's not how I personally ever would want to do work, is just going blindly. I want to be very thoughtful and make sure that we're both excited about the relationship working together, that we understand clearly where we're going, that they have an idea of business outcomes that they're looking to achieve. They're clearly articulated, clearly measurable, clearly things that are pointing us towards that those measures of success too along the way. Yeah, would never just kind of say, hey, congratulations, chose me, let's figure this out. No, I am much more like, I'll go full circle now and say I over index on discovery when I'm talking to potential new clients.
So potential outcomes would be okay. My community is 1,000 subscribers. Let's say that I'm building it on a Facebook group. I want to reach 10,000 in 10 months from now, and I want you to quiz members as per the value that they perceive of this group, and or just calculate the number of posts per day, the amounts of times that this person liked the post, and potentially try to calculate the NPS or something like that. Would and I want the score to be from 8 on 10 to 9 on 10. Would that be somewhat of a good example of a clear business outcome?
I would say you're pretty close. There are some things I would probably tweak in that. Uh, but generally, I mean, I think that I would probably over index again on more of the NPS because personally, like, there's nothing wrong with a small community if they love you. Like, you can have 10,000 members, great, but as we kind of said earlier, what happens if 10,000 members, 9,000 are just readers, and maybe they log in monthly or longer durations between periods of like checking in? Like, that's cool, but what about if you had just 150 people who lived, breathed, and died by your podcast, watched every single episode, like the first day it was released, and loved your LinkedIn content and all of these other things? Which one's more valuable to you?
I'd rather have my super fans for sure. A la Tim Ferriss, 1,000 super fans, which is a very hard thing. I probably have 3 super fans to this day, or maybe a bit more. So I'm 997 super fans away from my goals. So let's say that we set up these goals where we want to work with each other. Um, how much time should I hire you per month? Would it be somewhere around 25 hours a week, or I would guess probably smaller contracts, maybe 15 hours a week, 60 hours a month, $150 an hour for these 60 hours. So yeah, that would be 9,000 per month. Would that be a fair um, estimation of your services?
Um, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head where I would probably land. And as I would say, that I would probably have a lot more things to dig into before and understanding both sides of like budget, but also where we're looking to go and like how everything feels. Um, but I mean, that's at least the general like train of thought of how I build my business is like you're buying a bucket of hours, here's the rate, multiply it out, go from that multiple and see where we land.
Then
Um,
I'd calculate the ROI of that. Like let's say that my members interact more, and let's say that I can sign up 2x as much on my next cohort for my next the done with you program. Then yeah, like, and I guess there's also like community in my mind at least is very much medium long term. It's really about nurturing something that you can keep for a while. Do you agree with that, or is there a short-term ROI as well to communities?
I would say it's 100% a long-term like thing. You will see short-term like wins along the way, of course, but the long things like take the I will change this. I'm sorry. The great things come after a long time. Very rarely do you see great things happen very quickly. Most people, again, I will say like more generally speaking in the community space, generally would say you're not going to see significant, meaningful results until 12 to 18 months. And that's after you've dedicated time, money to resources, potentially tools, people, etc. So this is not something that people and companies can really do too well, in my opinion, like on the cheap per se. Um, Especially just given that like if you yourself don't want to own and be every day involved in the community, you're going to be paying someone else for it. So,
Right. Joel, thank you for the insights you've shared today. Where can people find out more about you?
yeah, I would just say follow me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. It's where I am almost every day, if not every day. Um, so just drop my name into it, and I assume that it'll just be hyperlinked in the show notes. So it'll be right there for you.